Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And hey, guess what? This week we've got a man. His name is Mark Zaglas, a very, very dear friend of mine. He's also the CEO of Encore Advisory Group. But you know what? He is so much more than his title. And we're going to explore that because I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter who you are going to find this conversation extremely interesting. So, Mark, before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, why are you excited to have this conversation with me today around courage?
Well, Kim, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me on. I think probably the first thing is just to have the conversation. I have no idea really where it's going to go or what it's going to explore. That's probably part and parcel of what courage is. But if I had to think about it, for me, it's in one word: curiosity. And if I had to give a TED talk, it would be on that topic. Um, and I have a little saying for myself, Kim, that be vulnerable and courageous through curiosity. I don't want a life of regrets. There's a whole backstory to that, but staying curious is what helps me to be courageous. And I'm on a lifelong journey of learning. So, having opportunities to sort of just talk about these sort of things, you never know what might come out.
Well, given the whole topic is courageous me, this is beautiful. So, curiosity, you said there's a whole story behind it. Give us a bit of a glimpse into what that story is.
Well, okay. So I think if it probably gets to a little bit about kind of me and where kind of this curiosity and courageousness kind of blend and morph in together. As a young kid, when things didn't go my way or were too hard or I was too scared or I had anxiety or had fears, I just made excuses, right? And I became really good at making excuses. But that only gets you so far in life.
Give me an example of an excuse you made.
It can be something as simple as, probably the one that always resonates with me. I was on my L plates driving along. Dad was in the passenger seat, obviously teaching me to drive, and I made a big stuff up, making a right-hand turn and almost caused an accident. And he was like, "What are you doing, son?" And I said, "Oh, Dad, I wasn't feeling too well. I was a bit sick in the stomach and da 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 da." And there was just enough of those along the way that as you get older, you just kind of hear yourself talking and going, "That's just." Yeah, so I mean that was just kind of one, but really strong, informative element that just went, you know, yeah, you can have fears, you can have anxiety, you can be, but if you don't find a way to step into being vulnerable and face into those, then courage is never going to come. Because to be honest with you, I don't think, I could be completely wrong, but just what I think at the moment, courage is not something that I think you do. I just think it's something you get when you step into vulnerability, when you face your fears and still find ways to move forward. And for me, being and staying curious is a really powerful way to pull yourself through those. And as you're pulling that through, you just kind of feel yourself getting a little bit stronger and a little bit braver, I guess. And then people would label it as courage.
I do agree with that, it's almost like a muscle, isn't it? That you've got to, when you start to flex it, when you start to do the repetitions, the more you do, the easier it gets, albeit not saying it's easy, but it is certainly something. Just going back to that, why do you think you made excuses? What's really underlying you making excuses? Say if you've stuffed up, for instance, you took a turn and nearly created an accident. Why do you think you made an excuse? Why did that play out?
Well, you peel away the onion layers on that. Fear of being wrong, fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being accepted. I think quite things I've all faced, and I think we all face. That probably as in my younger days, you care more about other people's opinions of you than your opinion of you, and then at some point that crosses over and you realize that no, the only opinion that really matters is mine, and am I living my true authentic self? And when you start making excuses and you start obfuscating and avoiding you're not working, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're not becoming more than, you're staying yourself. So it's like, I love to travel, but I don't want to go and visit the same city every year for the rest of my life. There's more to life than just staying in the one place. And for me, making excuses is just that simple way of reminding myself that there's more out there. Go get it. Yep, it can be scary. Yes, it can be vulnerable. Yes, you might fail. Yes, you might get judged. But, if I could go back to my younger self, geez, the lessons I'd want to tell them.
Oh, it would be quite a learning, wouldn't it? I
Yeah.
completely agree.
Your comment about the muscle is I totally agree with. Just to add to that, and Brene Brown talks on that, and I love her stuff. Her stuff around vulnerability and courage and being brave is brilliant, and she's a bit of a mentor of mine just from reading the books. I would love to have dinner with her, but she, yes, 100% agree. The more you work on something and build the muscle of it, the more effective you become. Not necessarily easier, but yeah.
So I need to address a really big elephant in this room, which is vulnerability and being a man are not normally two things that go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So it is beautiful and so refreshing for me to hear you say that quite openly about vulnerability. When do you think you really understood the role that vulnerability plays, one in terms of curiosity and courage that you've sort of alluded to, but even in terms of your success and your happiness over time?
Okay, that's a good question. Probably in a couple of different phases. I'd say pretty early on, I realized it was there. And to be perfectly frank with you, when you get in the men's shed, everybody has it, and everybody deals with it. And I think that there's certainly a very big movement in the male circle to spend more time talking about that. And I think we'll all be better off for that, for obvious reasons. I think it was probably a discovery for self that, look, not everybody's going to like you. You don't even like everybody, so, at some point you start to shed that. I think, I started that in my 20s. I reckon I probably got to a level of beginner competency about 5 minutes ago. I just think it would be something that I'll just forever kind of work on. But, in terms of using it as a source of good, it probably just came in little bite-sized pieces, that the more that I gave of myself, the more I got back. And certainly in my business world, which is all about helping businesses to grow, I quickly worked out that talking about commercials and financials and strategies is all part and parcel of it, but the real growth and breakthrough happens when you connect at the human level. And I actually kind of stumbled on that really early on, and it both is a secret of my success in my business, but it also held me back in the business world early on.
Okay, I want to know, why is it a secret, and how did you stumble on this secret, and why did it hold you back? So two questions there. So tackle whichever one you wish first.
Sure. As you said right at the beginning, being vulnerable or anything less than masculine was not a prerequisite for being in the sales, business development world in financial services in Australia through the 1990s and 2000s.
Oh, yes.
So
how did you do it?
Long story short, I turned myself in many knots trying to turn myself into what I thought they wanted to get into that world, because there was a higher calling for me to go through that, which we will get to. It leads to where my business is today. So I wasn't not going to get there. And I thought the pathway I first chose was, I had to bloke up. And to be honest, that lasted 5 minutes. Because I don't know where it's come from, probably my mum. I can't be anything else than who I am. Like it actually, it's too kind of hard and painful and hurtful to be inauthentic. I just don't like the person I am. When I thought, you know what, the pathway I chose at that time through an experience was, I'm just going to work harder and smarter and work my way around this. And if I get a chance, I'll show that I can still do it, even with a more balanced personality and persona than probably what was traditional in that sales world. And I was helped with timing. As I was coming into the sales world, it was changing. So yeah, once I got that shot, kind of the rest was history in that sales world.
Oh man, this is so cool. I'll tell you why. I'm a woman in the same industry. We did reasonably similar work for a little while, overlapping at MLC, which is obviously how we met each other. However, as a woman, one of the things we tried to do was to bloke up to fit in the male world, and that obviously doesn't work. So what you do is you try to work harder, work longer, do everything you can to overachieve, to try to get the recognition, because you're not one of the blokes. I love your term, bloke up. So as a man, what did bloking up look like for you?
Well, one of the criticisms was I was always too well dressed, too well presented, too well prepared, too well spoken, and that just blows my mind to this day, because it was universal. So number one, I worked on that and figured out that was about their vulnerabilities and insecurities. And I am who I am. And look, and number two, quite simply, was, you had to be out to lunch, out to dinner, at the clubs, drinking, doing all of those kind of extracurricular activities, which was really what I figured out was that is all that you have to offer business clients, is that kind of networking social element. And that probably then brings me to the kind of the flip side, which was, well, what are my strengths? And they were, I was been inside self-employed businesses through my family business since I was 12, and I just didn't realize what I'd learnt in there, and just how courageous my parents were running a business 7 days a week. And as I started to really tap into that, and sort of the experiences I had growing up from the age of 12, training, competing and teaching in martial arts, I had learnt by accident how to communicate with people as a teenager, women and men, teaching them self-defense, that were 10, 20, 30 years older than me. And so my age kind of didn't get in the way, and my relative inexperience didn't get in the way of being able to communicate with business owners, men and women, and kind of ironically or incidentally or by coincidence, probably nearly half of my panel had women business owners on it. And really, once I kind of got hold of that and figured out that, I had the business smarts, but it was the ability to unlock the barriers that business owners create for themselves, and that it's a lonely environment, and they just want someone to talk to that is real and can talk family, business, client, social, community, news, whatever, and then kind of help them cut through. I realized, okay, all right, there's something here.
This is definitely one of your superpowers. And what business did your family run?
They had a second-hand furniture business pre IKEA, Facebook Marketplace, all of that sort of stuff. So they ran it down there at Bondi Beach, and every day after school I was delivering furniture.
Wow, that wasn't then was that ever something you wanted to go into?
Well, knowing that this is recorded, I won't say it was child labour. It showed me two things. One, that Now, obviously, it's a dead business model today, but back then you didn't know that. But it taught me two things. One is if I was completely money dominant, sort of two, that I really, really have a connection with small businesses, that they feed the majority of Australian families in this country, and that's something really cool.
So why do you say that if you're money dominated, where's that bit come from? That you would have done it, but you didn't do it?
Well, I mean, the mum and dad worked for everything they could. They put three kids through private schools. We didn't want for anything. We had one holiday a year. Where they shut the shop for 2 weeks. We weren't kind of rolling all in it, but they made it a good living. Running a great business, and you kind of you're the king of that little world. But it wasn't. Looking back on it, it wasn't a great like. They weren't millionaires out of it. They made a good living. Looking back, it was a good, honest living. But at the time, as a kid, you're going, oh my God, like they buy something for $10 and sell it for $120. I'm going, but I'm going, oh yeah, but geez, you work hard for that, and you're tied to the business. You can't break free. You're trapped in it. All of that sort of stuff. So. It really helped level set what my values were. And yes, money is important to a point to facilitate, but there's more that I wanted to experience.
So so many questions for you, Mark. Where did you get clear on what your values were? I just picked up on you saying that. When and where did you get clear on them?
Yep.
And have they changed since then?
Good question. I probably didn't really start thinking about it consciously until my 20s.
That's still so young.
I think I was, are you kidding me? I look at my godchildren and go, my God, they've got things worked out at the age of 10.
I know 70-year-olds that still don't know their values, though. They still go, what are you talking about?
I knew in my 20s that, I guess through the experience of working in the family business and also working for my martial arts instructor in his business, that I really, really enjoyed and got a lot back from helping people break through things for them. And by helping them, it helped me. So I found this kind of reciprocity in, when you give, you get back. And if you give freely, you will get back in abundance. It may not be a direct one-to-one, but it will be. So that kind of value around, giving, which can have a selfish element because you want something back, right? But if you give it freely and just trust that you do that enough, that it will come back. And decades later, I'm completely 100% on board with that. Probably then through my 20s into my 30s was, okay, you're just sort of sitting doing the same thing, traveling the same streets, meeting the same people, and yes, you're in finance, which is very money driven, but I'm more driven around experiences, the acquisition of experiences and adventures. So literally my 30th birthday present to myself was, you will have 8 weeks a year off and 6 of it overseas. And despite I was in a corporate job, I'd been there for a long time, I was able to negotiate annual leave and long service and unpaid leave. And so from the age of 30 until COVID hit, I did 8 weeks off a year and 6 of it overseas traveling.
Wow.
That was hard, right? Because I had to sort of negotiate with bosses and run a 24/7 life, where I would be working sometimes on weekends or at nights or whatever to facilitate the other things. But that whole acquisition of experiences and adventures is really important. And again, I'm all about leverage. 1 + 1 = 3. As I was having those experiences, I was able to bring them into my business to business conversations and showcase to owners how you can untrap yourself and have it, not have it all, but you can find the balance. You've just got to prioritize, make decisions, deliberately move towards that. But getting clear on what that is, as I was working through it, being able to coach others through that. And no one wants to go see a personal trainer who's not fit, right? So I thought, well, if I'm going to have it was not so much a job or a career, but a calling in coaching. I got to do it first. So that was the second kind of value that really became real. And I guess the third one has just evolved over time. Maybe the words have changed, but the essence has always remained the same. And it's 3 simple words: grit, gratitude, and grace. Which has been closely followed in the last few years by confident, curious, and calm. And they'd be the kind of 2 main tent poles that I kind of, when things maybe aren't going so well, or I'm finding it hard, or I'm a bit fearful, or lacking a little courage, I go to, does it just need a little bit of grit? Does it need a little bit of gratitude, or does it need a little bit of grace? Which one of those 3 ingredients do I need a spoonful of? And whether it's my ultra running or it's my business, probably need a bit of all 3 all the time.
Oh, that is glorious. But again, it's so mature in thinking, like the self-awareness that you have to even have those pillars, to have those values, but to have them from such a young age. Like I said, to you might think you missed the boat and not working it out till you're starting your 20s and 30s. But like I said, I know so many people that spend their whole life not knowing, and then they never get the satisfaction or feel the success that they want because they've got nothing to tie it back to. Just to finish off something else I asked you earlier, when you were looking at, or when did you get into personal development and self-awareness? When did that happen?
Another good question. Probably by accident, without me labeling it. At school, I mean, whether it was just being on the sporting field and wanting to always be better, I love to train. I mean, to be honest with you, I want to be a professional exerciser when I grow up, right? If I could get paid to run, ride, and swim, I mean, maybe take photos too. So, I love to train. I love to practice. I love to get better. And so, be it school, in sporting, probably academically, not till year 11 when I said, "Hey, Mum, I need a tutor." And kind of thirdly, I started martial arts at the age of 12, and that I mean, I was 6 days a week with adults, and you just can't help but be absorbed into adult thinking, more mature thinking, and you're always there, 5 days a week training, 2 days teaching, and then every couple of months competing. You've just got those goals and objective measures. You've got a grading system from white belt to black belt, and so you just get absorbed in that world, and that was my world for 30 years. And because it's so graded, it just encourages yourself, and I think I just carried that through. I was in a relatively competitive environment when I stepped into my work career, particularly in the sales world, and you can just see it when you work and then you get success. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. And I can see where the training in the martial arts. You're 12 though, right? I know a lot of 12-year-olds that do martial arts and they go once a week. You're talking 6 days a week. Why did you do that?
It was probably when I got into my teenage, probably when I got sort of 14, 15. Number one, I loved it. So everything that I do starts with that. I loved it. And when I love something, some people admire this about me. Other people use it as a criticism. When I love something and enjoy something, I go right in. Like I am boots. Sometimes I frustrate myself so much. It's like if I want to do a new hobby, it's like, yes, but do you have the 40 hours a week to devote to this?
I must say, it's one thing I do absolutely adore about you is if we're talking about something that you're passionate about, I know it. I can feel it. I can feel your energy, your buzz, because you're right in it, and it's a delicious quality. I totally love it. So I now start to understand through that martial arts. What did you love about it, though? What could you pinpoint what you really loved about it?
Um, yeah, well, yeah. Initially, it was in the schoolyard. I went to a very privileged private school, right? So take this with a grain of salt. Private school, pretty much white. As a Greek boy, copped a lot of grief and bullying, and so initially it was like, you know what, I'm going to do something about this, right? I wasn't smart enough to deal with it verbally, and I said, you know what, if you're going to keep coming at me physically, then I'm going to figure out how to defend myself. But really quickly, and I can like this has stayed with me literally from the first lesson I did. I never got into one more fight at school. Something just changed, where it was just kind of like there's so much more to dealing with confrontation than physical, and I'm here physical. I'm dealing with learning to fight, but it was all about. I think I was very lucky with the community and the instructor that I fell in with. That it was very much about defense, and you kind of got it all out of your system. And as I started to progress and get better, you enjoy it more. You want to train more. I wanted to compete. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to have adventures. I wanted to have experiences. I wanted to figure out, could I step in the ring, which scared the hell out of me. Probably that's the environment where I first had to face into this topic that we call courage. I was uber curious to see whether I was good enough to compete, and uber curious to experience what it was like to really be under attack. And yes, it's in a controlled environment, but when someone's coming at you and that's going to land and it's going to hurt, to step into the ring, I had a height disadvantage, physical, fitness wise, I was at disadvantage, but I don't know, I just kept getting in there and getting beaten up. And it just made me want to keep getting in there and getting better until the point where, yeah, I did. And once I kind of crossed that threshold, it was pretty instructive for me that failures aren't failures if you take learnings from them. And I know it's easy to say, but I kind of got that really early on, which is a very great life lesson to get, right? So I talk a lot, even in my coaching world, about successful failures. I said, when I've led teams, I don't care if you don't hit the target. Just tell me what you learned and how you're going to be better next time. And that will always come back to you in spades, but you've got to have a lot of courage, particularly in the corporate world, to back that. And that's ultimately why I left corporate world, because corporate world won't back you in that space. Well, not the corporate world that I existed in. Probably a little bit still too blokey, or too immature, but that's been my life. People who have backed me, and I back them, and it eventually works its way out.
I just have visions of Karate Kid here. Just you and doing all that. What I love, though, it's kind of like a superhero, isn't it? Though they've got all this power, but they don't use it to go around and beat everyone up, unless obviously baddies in terms of superhero movies. But they use it for good. They use it only when they have to. So I love that you said that, once you had the ability to fight, you never actually fought.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, look, yes, you learn the physical side, but what it does give you, and why I'm a big advocate for kids training in a martial arts with the right instructor, is it breeds confidence, it breeds self-esteem, and that carries into a room before you arrive. And so, I've later on, as I got older, I did get into and we did self-protection work and a little bit of bouncing just to have the experience. But I worked with a crew. We could diffuse any situation with the gift of the gab, and just by portraying confidence. Now, that confidence comes from the knowing that you can back it up, or at least you believe you can. But that was instructive too, right? That if you do the work, you do the homework, you know your stuff, Sure, maybe there's a bit of, fake it till you make it. We've all heard that saying, but if you can dance on a pinhead and you put yourself in enough situations with, 10 years of 6 days a week, I've been in enough situations to know, okay, if something happened, I'd have a crack. I could get hurt. And you're aware of that. You're aware of all the consequences. I'm not infallible by any stretch of the imagination, but that part of that knowing that, yes, I could hurt someone, but someone could hurt me too. There's just a different way you talk. There's a different way you show up. There's a different presence, and I can see it. I can tell someone walks through the door, if they've been trained, you just know.
Isn't that interesting? But what I love here too is the fact that you can back it up. So if you are put in that situation, if the gift of the gab or getting out of it's not working, you've got the smarts behind you, which is all the training and everything that you've done to actually get out of it. So, and really, really keen on the confidence that it's given you, not just in life or if you're walking down a dark alley, that it's transferred through into your work life as well. Just on that note, you mentioned you left the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that. Why did you do that?
Well, two simple reasons. One, my values and corporate values were going in different directions. And two, I wanted to have a different experience and adventure.
And what experience and adventure were you going to when you left the corporate world? Did you know, or
yeah,
how did that work?
Again, I'm really lucky. You get to kind of almost look back and write the story, but my business partner will be my only business partner, Tom Redcliffe. He and I met day one, 1st of February 1993 on the floor of MLC. He'd just driven down from Brisbane. I'm a Sydney boy. Both our first day at MLC, we were the first people we met. We've been best mates ever since. And I reckon from within 6 months of that, we said we will do something together at some stage. And we pretty much individually managed our careers to acquire the skills and experiences to ultimately do this, which is to run the Encore business. So
you leave the corporate world, both of you.
Yep.
And you start a business.
Yeah, so Tom had left a year or two before me, and he was out there running his own kind of shingle. And then he met Graham Peaty, who was the current owner of Encore Advisory Group at the time. Basically, then I was then starting to work my way out of corporate, and the three of us just sat down and said, "Yeah, we're family. We've got the same values, the same sort of ideology on the industry and the legacy we want to leave or impact and leave." And so that was it. It was a pretty easy decision. Like I said, I'd been, all the jobs I'd taken throughout my corporate career was to acquire the experiences and the skills to do this, which made it sometimes difficult in corporate land because people couldn't understand why I was doing certain jobs or taking certain things. And that's a little bit of where you got to find a bit of courage too, because it's very easy to be forced into swimming with the tide that you've got to go this particular corporate ladder. Like they're pulling out chairs to do these jobs that are seen as a promotion and probably are, but you're saying no. And when you say no to people up the line, it can start to limit other opportunities. And if you're not 100% sold on what you want to do and where you want to go and be really uber confident in that, it's hard. You end up just acquiescing. And then, I just didn't want to be 50, 60, in the same corporate job, mixing with the same people. Having said that, some of my best friends are from the corporate world, but you know what I mean? It just didn't match the experiences and adventure bucket.
Back to experience and adventure. I want to go down there shortly.
Sure.
So you said it was easy. Not everyone who leaves the corporate world and goes into self-employment uses the word easy. How did you know that this was just your part of your calling? I know your calling is deeper than that, but how did you know? Like, when did you know?
So I always knew I wanted to do it, but it was probably 3 or 4 years before it actually happened that I went, okay, it's time to move. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm in the back half of a marathon here. And for those that don't know, a marathon's 42 kilometers, 42.2, but halfway is 35K, right? So when I say, and the second half of a marathon is the last 7K, right? And the reason is it takes just as much energy and effort and emotional toll to do the last 7 as it does to take the first 35. So I was proverbially in the last half of my corporate career in the last 4 or 5 years. And I go, this is taking as much energy to get up, to do the right thing, to do the job. It's taking 3, 4, 5 times the amount of energy that it once did. And so I knew that it was time. And so then I just started to make decisions and cultivate opportunities and get thinking, where the mind goes, your energy flows. And so as you start working on it, it's the age-old thing. I did my job 9 to 5, 5 to 9. I worked on my next step. And so you just find a way, as I coach business owners, you got to bring the walls of the canyon close enough and then have the confidence and courage to make the jump, right? So you'll never get it there. You'll never get it. So it just took, probably 3-4 years as we just worked on it. So Tom and I just kept talking. And then he then brought Graham and Encore, and then it was just like, this is close enough. Let's go and back ourselves. And you think through worst case scenario. And I just went, okay, well, I can sell my apartment and move back in with mum and dad if it all goes belly up. And I went, okay, all right, well, I love my folks. It was both a comfort that I had that, but also a significant motivating force to not have that materialize. So
I'm sure they were very pleased that self-employment worked out in your favour too.
Dad would ask me, I had 9 months off between corporate and starting the business. And I would have Dad asking me every month, Sonny, you going to start working anytime soon?
Because he was probably concerned if you don't, you are going to be coming back home. Okay, back on to adventures and experience. 2 things you've mentioned are photography, and you know way too much about marathons to not have done some yourself. Talk to me about both of those 2 things and how they've played out in your role and what you're doing with them right now.
Yeah, okay. We'll start with running because that one came along well before photography. In the last 5 minutes, I can mouth these words. I identify myself as many things, but definitely a runner. I don't know why I wouldn't have said that years ago. But again, at the age of 30, I said, you know what? I want to have the experience of what is it like to run a marathon. I could not run a kilometre. My martial arts career had kind of faded out, so my fitness had gone. I put on a little bit of weight. But this calling of experiences, it was like everybody talked about running through the wall and what it's like. And I went, oh, well, there's only one way to figure out what that is like. So anyway, set a path to that. Did 5K, did 10K, did 21K, then went to a marathon. And crossing that line, honestly, I've never done drugs in my life. But if that feeling is what you get on drugs, I can understand why people do it. It was just amazing, and I was hooked from there. So I was very fortunate to have some 2 great mates, and we just spent the next 10 years traveling the world, running marathons together, here and overseas.
Well, did you at least get to see some of the pubs and drink some beer? Or
we had a rule, which was so after every training run on a Saturday, we'd go and have breakfast together, which was amazing, and that was bloke talk. As in good men's shed talk, right? And the other rule was after every international marathon, we would go clubbing somewhere in the city. Primarily because at the end of a marathon, you never look as good or as fit as you do at any other time than you do at the end of a marathon. So we put on the black jeans and the black t-shirt and off we go. It wasn't enough, but we certainly figured out a way to balance that. I mean, that's where the gratitude comes in from one of my values, I guess, is like I just blessed to have, such good mates that were into the same thing, that we just supported each other, right? Because when you start running and you're running for 2, 3, 4 hours, conversations are different, right? And not to get more, maybe this should get a bit more deep and meaningful, and I certainly don't go too deep into this as just a matter of course, but it's that kind of Japanese proverb saying, where is life about the journey or the destination? And the reply is neither. It's about the company. Certainly the journey, the training towards a goal, whatever that is, in this case running a marathon, and the actual doing it on the day. The day is uber fun, right? Because you've done all the training. But those conversations and company along the way, when you're out there for 2, 3, 4 hours, you ask a question. Nobody has to reply immediately. You've got 20, 30, 40K to explore it.
And you've got to keep some energy to run, right? How do you talk and run?
One of the rules of running, you build your fitness so you can talk and run. And I just fell in love with that, to the point where once I got to marathons, I went to 50K. Then I went to triathlon. Then we went as the boys club. We called ourselves the Fat Fit Club, because we proved that you can be fat and fit. That's a whole other story. We went then to triathlon to have that experience. So we went through Olympic, half to Ironman, and then they got married and some have had kids, and so I've continued kind of on my own, but have met new people by moving into trail running. And so last few years moved through the gears of 50K, did a couple of 100K runs last year, and as you've mentioned or alluded to, I've got a 100-mile run, my first one, coming up in 4 weeks' time.
Okay, what's 100 miles in kilometres?
160 technically, but this is 168 kilometres through the snowy mountains.
You're going to run 168 kilometres through the snowy mountains. How long have you got?
I've got 38 hours. There'll be a fair bit of walking in there too, Kim, to be fair, right?
Do you eat? Do you sleep? How does it work?
Well, they call these ultra trail runs, that they're basically an eating event with a little bit of walking and running in between. So yeah, you're fueling. There'll be I've got to probably consume about 17,000 calories over the 30 hours.
How do you do that?
A lot of practice.
Hamburgers and chips?
No.
Which doesn't seem like you'd do that if you're ultra super fit to run it. What do you eat?
Well, it comes back to, it's a lot of training. You've got to train your stomach to be able to consume calories while you're running. So there's certainly running type fuel, gels, bars, kind of high carbohydrate, glucose foods. But in these ultras, you've also got to eat real food. So you've got to figure out what works for you. So for me, it's watermelon, bread, potato soup. Those would be my kind of 3 go-to real foods.
Far out. Oh my God. But you know how they say with weightlifters or bodybuilders that they do all this training, which is great, so they can compete in that, but what it does to their body, because that's not a normal, sustainable way of living. Is there something like that applies in this ultra marathon space too, given that you, like you said, it's not just physically training your body and I'm assuming your mind, but also your stomach and your diet?
There is short-term impacts to that, like you kind of want to purge your body for a couple of days afterwards because you've got a lot of caffeine and sugar going through you. But if I've understood your question correctly, and if not, then this is a different tangent. There isn't a shadow of doubt in my bone, in my soul, in my heart, in my head that our machine, our body was born to run. And over the last number of centuries, through the industrial age, the information age, the AI age, blah, 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 we have become sedentary. And I didn't like that about me. I didn't like that I was falling into this sedentary pattern. And at the age of 30, I projected to the age of 70 and just went, man, if my life ends because I can't move and I can't run with my godchildren or my nieces or nephews or just go out and travel the world and do the things that I want to do, that doesn't mean you have to run ultras or even a marathon. You just have to move, right? And my parents were very instructive with that. They're in their mid-80s and could still run rings around people in their 60s. because they were so physical in the furniture business, and then they were able to just keep staying physical, and there's a few other stories that we can go into maybe, but we're born to run, and then for me, I found the joy in the running. It's meditative for me. I journal in my head on my run. I run most of my long runs on my own, and then I get to balance that with company when that occasion comes, and I enjoy that. But I can go for, I did the Bondi to Manly Ultra 3 weeks ago, which was 80 kilometres. I ran for 9.5 hours, and it was just one of the most joyous experiences to run on the foreshore. The coastline and the foreshore of this city is exquisite. The sun was out, people were out, and you're physically able to do it, but more importantly, mentally. And that's the thing that I love most is my body's my body, and it will fail at some point, and there may be failings tomorrow, right? And if that happens, that happens. But if I can keep the mind going, then there's something.
And Mark, how old are you?
Oh, I'm 50. I turned 50 this year.
You're 50
Yeah.
running 168 kilometres for fun. I love that.
Well, let's come back in 3 weeks' time. The longest I run at the moment is 100K. So this is my next adventure, my next experience to have, 160. So again, it's probably born out of people who have done this telling me that your world changes at 120K. And I'm just uber curious about what that feels like. There will be tears. I will absolutely be calling mum in the middle of the race, right? And I will probably have wanted to have quit 1,000 times. But I guess if we're coming back to the theme of, this conversation, I don't think I'm a courageous person, but I'll have to dig deep, and I'll have to dig into the proverbial pain cave that I haven't ever been to before to get through. I know that. I don't know what it's going to be like because I've never been there. I'll definitely tap into 20 years of running experience, and hopefully 9 out of 10 problems that I encounter over those 30 hours I'll be able to solve. But something will happen where I won't have encountered it before, and I'll have to go into some serious problem solving mode. And I do like that. That in itself is exciting, to figure out a problem. And I'm sure there'll be tears. I'll be crying home to mum, but I'm just curious about it.
I love it. You can still call your mum for things like this, even though you're a 50-year-old man. Oh. And being able to tap into that problem solving. And again, you've got your back, right? You've got 20 years of evidence that you are a runner behind you. So whatever problem does come up, albeit this is a different kettle of fish, being 168 kilometres versus 100 kilometres, because of course they're so different. They can tell I don't run. Then, what a huge challenge. Do many women do this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know what the exact numbers would be, but I'd be probably surprised if it wasn't close to 50-50. I see just as many women out there doing it. In fact, one of my closest friends is one of my running partners. She runs her own business. She's a physio by trade, which is great for me. So one of my running buddies is also a physio, and she does marathons and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, absolutely. Like, some of the best ultra runners in the world are female, and whether it's male or female, they both inspire me. And plenty of women finish in front of me in these events, right? So there's something else that goes on. These things, the longer the races go, the less gender plays a part.
Tell me about that. That's interesting.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and I have actually seen the results so there's credibility from that point of view, but I haven't done my own research to get into all the depths of it. But as the ultra running community, trail running, is relatively young, and so it's, and races are getting longer, just as more and more people are getting into it, and have, like, I guess me, you kind of go through the gears, and you go, well, if 50K is fun, 100's got to be twice as much fun. So you just kind of move through, and you want to test yourself and all that sort of stuff. But they're now getting up into 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers, multi-day. where you have to add in sleeping as a strategy through the race. And there's all sorts of variances on it. But as the races are getting longer, gender's becoming less and less of a difference, and women are finishing in the top 10, top 3 and winning. Um, uh, and they've kind of, I've seen the language change when they're reporting the results. You always report first male finisher, first female finisher. Now they're reporting the first male and the first female and announcing first overall, to account for the fact that there are times where a woman is finishing first or in the top 3 or top 4 out of all genders. And it just shows me that your mind and your heart and your soul can play such a big part. And I'm exploring how do you tap into that in your business and in your relationships and in your personal life. And hell, if we could tap into that in the community, be amazing, right? So
Oh, that is phenomenal. And I can even see, just hearing how you're speaking about it, the discipline, the dedication, the fact that, to do something at this level, you really have to know it inside out. This is not just something you dabble in. You might dabble in a half marathon or a fun run, but you don't dabble at this level.
Yeah.
And I don't think you dabble in anything in life, right? You're either all in. Just talk to me as well about your photography, because I've got to say, I don't know a lot about photography and the type of photography you do, but can I say the photos I've seen of yours have got to be the best I've ever seen in the world. And I'm not doing that because you're on this call and you're my friend. I absolutely mean it. So how does that play out? What does that give you, and why did you start doing it?
Well, firstly, thank you. It's very kind. Again, there's a little thing that got parked in the back of my head. Like as a young kid, Dad had this Nikon camera. This is kind of in the 80s, and it was forbidden for us kids to touch it, right? His camera and stereo system were the two things we weren't allowed to touch. But one day, he asked me to go get a roll of film, and he told me what to get, and I went and got it. And then I managed to kind of convince him to show me how to load the film, and I said, can I just take a photo? And that whole act of click, this is a machine, and you put it up there and you clicked the button, but you didn't get any instant gratification, right? The film had to go and get developed and then come back to you, and then you kind of saw, and it was almost like I can't draw or paint to save my life, but kind of, well, you can take a photo. And so that always stuck with me. But it wasn't until many decades later, that I think it was probably around 2017. We'd had kind of mobile phones with cameras and that sort of stuff. And I remember getting my first iPhone and going, it's not a phone, it's a camera, right? So my iPhone's always a camera first. But at that sort of time, 2017, my running mates had gone off into other life choices, like I said, marriage and kids. And so I was starting to travel on my own. So I went, you know what? I'm not going to be with my friends traveling and have that kind of companionship, and we've got the running sort of thing. So I went, let's pick up a camera. So I went and bought my first camera and went overseas, and I just went, you know what? It was just the right time. The universe, and I guess where I was at, was just going, you've got running, you've got riding, you've got swimming, you've got your business, you've got friends, you've got all of this activity, but nothing really too creative. And so it was probably just a confluence of those things. And the moment I fell in love with photography, when I realized, I really like this, was I was in Italy, Rome, with my second family, which is amazing in and of itself. And I had made plans to get up the next morning at 4 a.m. to go shoot the Colosseum at sunrise. I was going out on my own, so they knew that. So I kind of got out, walked out, and it's Rome, right? It's a 3,000 plus year old city. It's dark. No one's on the streets. And I'm walking down these cobblestones. And for the next 4 hours, I watched a city wake up. I heard the first roller shutter go up. I heard the first espresso machine turn on. I saw the first car, the first other person, and The only other people I'd met until that point in time were a couple of other photographers, and we would just nod at each other, say good morning, and let each other do our thing, because you know that you just want to be in your moment. And so long story short, I just watched a city wake up, and that's what I do every time I go to a new city now. It's one of my things. And what I found with photography is it allows me to have experiences I never had. My marathoning allowed me to experience a city in a way that you never would. So I know New York through the lens of marathoning versus and they're different cities. The community's different, the conversation's different, and photography does the same thing for me. And it's the only thing that makes me stop and sit for 2 or 3 hours to watch the sun come up.
But you're so good at it too. Like, you're not just doing it for fun. I mean, I'm sure it is a lot of fun, but you are so good.
Well, I don't know about that, but like, when you enjoy something, you invest in it. So I mean, like my business or my running or what have you, I've just invested the 10,000 hours into it, right? I've studied, I've read, I've spoken to people, I've gone on photography workshops. I found photographers that were doing photography trips in Norway. So I jumped on a plane and went and spent weeks with them, down in Antarctica, across in New Zealand, here in Sydney. I've just met really good professional photographers, and I just talk to them and I pick their brains, and I go online and I study and I research and you practice. And trust me, look, for every good photo you see online, Kim, there's 1,000 shit ones, right? So I taught a lesson by a really good photographer, Mark, right? Good photography is about never letting people see your shit ones, right?
That's gorgeous.
But look, it's just like, my business, right? I want to understand the science and the framework and the process and the methodology and all of that sort of stuff. But then you get to craft it with your personality and your art and your intuition. And photography does that in its microcosm. Running does that in its microcosm, and business does it in its own thing. I think that's where, two people can look at the same thing and come up with something different.
Oh, completely. So you're a world-class photographer. You are an ultra marathon runner. You're a business owner extraordinaire who's absolutely kicking butt. What's something you haven't done that's on your list to do yet?
Oh, well, plenty. For one, I have to learn to play the guitar properly, right? So that sits there. I need to get back to learning to speak Greek properly. That's my one regret.
Why do you say need? Why was it a need?
Well, it's a drive. It's something I want to do.
Okay.
It's my only regret that I have in life, that I didn't learn to speak Greek properly as a kid growing up.
What a terrible regret.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a big one. The Dad's never looks at me more proudly when I speak a bit of Greek to him. So they're two.
Yeah. None of all those other achievements are going to quite make him as proud as if you can actually have a really decent conversation in his language.
That's right.
Oh, I love that. You are seriously one ultra courageous man. And I love that you give everything you do, you give it your best. You'd never I can't imagine you doing anything half-hearted. Just, it's incredible. Not everyone is like you. What is your call? Over all of this, you mentioned very early on that it all comes back to knowing your calling. What is your calling?
My calling, in a business sense?
Life sense.
Well, my calling, I guess, probably in a business life sense, probably all change into the one thing. I do want to personally grow, develop, be the best version of myself, right? But all in service of, I'd love to leave a legacy in some way, shape or form. So just kind of leave the place in a little bit better place than when I found it. And I definitely found that in this industry, financial advice. And it that's probably the thing that's the fuel that drives Encore Advisory Group. We do business coaching and we help businesses to be profitable and sustainable and blah, 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 blah. But we're all about helping owners get a better return on their business and their life, which is important, number one. But the deeper why underneath that is, this is not so well known. financial stress, etc., has the biggest impact on mental health in this country. And Tom and I have figured out that if we can help get more advice to more Australians, to help them to be more confident and secure in their current and future financial situation, then we will lessen the impacts of mental health on the country and save more lives. So that's what fuels and drives us in our business. It's all about getting more advice to more Australians, making it more accessible and more affordable. And if they can become more confident and reduce their stress, then mental health in this country will just improve significantly. That's our calling.
And doesn't that make it easier to get up every single day and go and do what you do?
It makes us. I mean, it's why we repel some clients who don't like our forthrightness. That's okay. Which is more about, we're close to home, but we do it with respect and we do it with care and we do it with love. But we'll tell you what we think, whether it's likable or not. And that took a little bit of courage starting up a business, because when you need income to feed the family, and you're saying no to someone, that's really hard. But
when you're saying no because it's part of your calling and your bigger purpose, your why, it makes it easier, doesn't it?
It does make it easier, but when you've got your own financial pressures coming in, particularly when COVID hit, and you've got this over here, you've really got to be, you got to find that. So that Jim Collins, good to great. You've got to find the thing that you really love doing, the thing that you're good at, the thing that you can make money, and bring that all together. And so we're not shy about that, right? Money's the fuel that fuels life and keeps it sustainable, right? At some point, that caps out, but you do need that. And as soon as I cottoned on to people's mental health being hit, hurt, and impacted by financial stresses, that's when the industry got real.
Oh, wow, Mark. I know we do get to catch up and go deep and have these kind of conversations, but this is certainly a conversation that could go on for how many hours is your 168-kilometre run? I think I need to run with you so we can unpack so many of those little rabbit holes that we've just uncovered. I think I'd rather do it over about 20 dinners. I'll leave the running to you. Thank you so much. There are so many gold nuggets of courage, of perseverance, of understanding your purpose, your why, being clear on your values, and acquiring experiences and adventures. Wow. Seriously, wow. Thank you for sharing. If anyone wants to find out a bit more either about your work or ultra marathoning or just a bit more about you, your photography, where should they go? Where can we direct them?
Well, they can find my business on just go to our website, Encore Advisory Group.
Yep, I'll pop that in the show notes.
And on my Instagram under my name, Mark Zaglas, also known as the running photographer. So I post, some of my running adventures and some of my photos. I'm not, every day sort of thing, but people get in contact with me through one of those two channels.
Beautiful. So if you want to learn a bit more about Mark and either the work he does, you want to look at some of his world-class photography, you want to do some ultra marathoning, or just hear about the life of a running photographer, get on, and I'll put all the contact details in the show notes for you to check out. Cool. Mark, amazing speaking to you. I can't wait till we do this again.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim.